drama going on in Capitol Hill. Everything is on the chopping block, including all the climate and health, climate and incentives that we've drawn into the IIJA and IRA, and all of these companies, again, are not. I wish we could have had over 100 companies join us this year, but at least we have 75, and that's great. But I think that policy uncertainty with the administration can lend itself to sort of having a great barrier to cross collaborate.
Thank you. Amna from BSR, let me turn it over to you. It's not every day that I get to be on a panel with two Amnas. This is so much fun.
I know, it's awesome. I think that should be a requirement for all panels moving forward. No, I'm just kidding. But Amna, honestly, you took the words right out of my mouth at the end there with the policy landscape and just the environment. I mean, I think it's so tough when, we kind of make progress and businesses are moving forward, and then, regulations change or administrations change and things kind of go up in the air. And then we lose this time trying to figure out, what's going on and where are we? And so I think that is a barrier for businesses, right? Because they're trying to keep up with changing regulations. They're trying to keep up with, what words can and can't be said. And I think one thing that we really advise our members on is to just stay grounded in your actual core values, right? Like, we know that working on climate, working on nature, working on climate and health, like that improves the business, that is good for business, and it's part of business values to do good to their employees. And so I think that I just don't want to, I want to really highlight what Amna said, that I think that's making it tough for businesses to move forward and tough for businesses to collaborate. But the solution through it is remembering, what are our core values? What do we believe in, regardless of what a regulation may or may not be, or what an administration may or may not be saying, and what is good for me, my employees, and my product. And that will always come back to, climate and nature positive solutions, positive public health. And of course, there is always the business case. And I know that's kind of the thing that we always lean back on, but I really love this one statistic. So, to meet the Paris climate goals, it'll cost us about 1% of GDP. But the health impacts from air pollution alone, so that's not even, considering heat or any of the other kind of health topics we've talked about today, just air pollution alone are expected to cost almost 5% of GDP, right? So this is an expensive topic. This is an expensive problem. And if we address climate change, if we address the health impacts from climate change, we hit two birds with one stone, right? And that's good for everybody. So yeah, I think, I don't want to underscore how tough it is for businesses and partners to move forward when things are changing all around us, but ultimately it is the least expensive option, and it is the best option to drive forward on these priorities, regardless of what the environment looks like.
So, Martha, let me turn it over to you.
Well, I've been sitting here having some very radical thoughts that these kinds of partnerships allow for, just like we've had this major political realignment, it may be time for businesses to rethink the kinds of alliance and partnerships that they're in. And so I'm thinking of the big trade groups and, from the chambers to the American Chemistry Council to others who've from an environmental justice perspective have often sort of gotten in the way of more policies that help us implement, more upstream precautionary approaches. That maybe this is offering us a different kind of incredibly politically powerful partnership between companies, communities, our communities want jobs, right? And what if we got to work with a company and said, can you make this job the safest as possible? Can you engineer the danger out of the job? Because at the end of the day, whether it's, those dirty jobs are some of the most dangerous jobs. So is there a way to create common cause that actually also helps realign the forces that have stood in the way of progress, right? Which is some of those big trade associations. So that's just, maybe it's still early here in LA. Not really. I can't say it's 12:30, but maybe it's what I would like to see, because we can't make the changes that we want often because of the power of those forces on the ground.
I appreciate how all three of you shared a barrier and some ways around that barrier. I love that. I want to make sure I leave at least an opportunity for a few questions from those in the room and those who are here virtually. I know time. Yes. So let me turn it over to see if anybody would like to ask a question. I'm happy to bring you the mic, and I will also see what we have in the chat. We have a question right here. Here.
Thanks. I'm wondering what you all who work with the business community are doing to try to fend off the apparently planned efforts to repeal the endangerment finding, on which everything else at the federal level rests. I'm speaking about the Clean Air Act endangerment finding, which is the bedrock of federal decision. I mean, not that it's going to happen anything over the next 4 years in terms of something good, but taking away the endangerment finding would be very problematic for many reasons.
Yeah, I mean, I can go ahead and get started. So we work with businesses on the policy and regulatory space. So oftentimes we'll take companies to Capitol Hill, in this case, to the administration. We are familiar and have worked with Rep. Or now Secretary Zeldin in the past, so have had a relationship with him in the past. So I think we were, as I mentioned earlier, we were supposed to have administration meetings today, but because of the session, the Trump administration speaking to the joint session of Congress, all those meetings have been pushed back either to later this week, we'll see, or even in like a few weeks. But the idea is that we are going to be engaging with this administration, right? Just because it's changed doesn't mean that our values have changed or what we want to protect has changed. So we are hoping to go and engage with the administration. And it could be that means that we need to provide comment letters instead. All of these things, the regulatory process, you do have a space to do public comments, whether they take your, comments into account, that's to be said, but at least there is that space to engage. And sometimes in this particular case, I think, I know in the first Trump administration, there were a lot of rollbacks that occurred, right? So we were out there defending against these rollbacks and cuts constantly, and constantly bringing up the business case for why these should not go back. So that's how we would be approaching it.
Is that not really on your radar screen yet?
The Clean Air Act, that is not on our radar screen yet. Yeah, sorry. Okay, I will make sure it is.
Unless either of you have, Martha or Amna from BSR, have anything to add, I'm going to shift to the next question with the most up votes. And that is wondering if you have tips to help investors differentiate greenwashing, performative corporate goals, from real emission reductions. And, I think in a time where this work is very hard, this is a really good question. I'm going to first turn it over to Amna, let me turn it over to you from BSR.
Oh, yeah, not an easy one for sure. That's a tough question. I mean, yeah, look, like that is a very real concern, right? And I think everyone wants to make sure that, and we're responsible for keeping businesses, accountable for doing what they actually say. So, I mean, it's not as great of an answer as I'd like to say, but I mean, we really just have to wait and see. We really have to. Emissions reductions don't happen right away. It's long-term plans. Like we really need to see, if a business is making a long-term SBTI goal, or if they've committed to net zero, what does the progress look like? Are they continuing to communicate on that? Is there kind of real examples that are coming, and real implementation that's happening? Or do we see a commitment being removed 5 years later, right? So it's such a tough one to answer, but I mean, I think we have to continue keeping, businesses feet on the fire and keeping them accountable, and also supporting them through that process, of course, but we also just kind of have to wait and see, right? would welcome thoughts from the other Amna and Martha on that one, because I think that's a question we all kind of are constantly toying with.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Amna. I will say that I think asking investors and financial institutions to really promote transparency and disclosure is key, right? And providing that standard framework so that companies are also not overburdened by a different sort of cheese board of standards that may pop up. I can imagine that the SEC rule is probably not going to be coming to fruition at the end of the day. However, the California disclosure rules are going to be implemented, right? So right now we're engaging with CARB, which is the California Air Resources Board. We're asking companies to provide comments to Ceres even, so that our letter is actually inclusive, obviously not of everything that they want, but certainly inclusive of their thoughts, so that we are presenting from the implementation side, a really thoughtful approach to how companies can actually do disclosure. Having said that, I think, the investor community, the financial community also promoting that is really helpful, because then it's also sending a clear message to the businesses that they do need clear data. They do need very sort of precise data in order to then, further invest in their company or direct investments towards their projects, cleaner projects, what have you. So I would say that's definitely a key aspect of that.
Marta, I'm going to ask if you'd like to weigh in there, especially from a community perspective.
Well, I think, monitoring when we, it's interesting because we submitted some of Ceres' reports when we were working on the scoping plan for AB 32, because of the promises around carbon capture that we were seeing made and how much it was going to reduce. And we were really worried that there'd be a lot of greenwashing and an inability to meet those profound goals because of where the technology was. And so your reports that really, warned about greenwashing were very helpful to the EJ community to say, there's a business case for actually doing real zero versus net zero. And so I think transparency, real life, sort of real-time data in terms of our emissions going up in a particular community was something we asked for as part of the AB 32 process. And so that if we were looking at things like offsets and other things that we felt could end up harming environmental justice communities. So not a lot of answers to that other than, data transparency and actual real requirements for reductions, whether we're talking about greenhouse gases or the use of toxic of petrochemicals as well.
Excellent. And I love hearing how a report that Ceres produced made such an impact on an EJ organization. And I think, that kind of speaks to the whole spirit of it is going to take us all, but it's not going to take us all working individually. It is going to take us all working collectively across industries, across communities. There are some other good questions. We are unfortunately not going to be able to get to them because we only have 2 minutes, but I'm just going to ask all of our panelists to share one last thought, and that would be, and this is, an of the moment question, but if you could share any advice you would have or suggestions of what people in this room can do, and this is in this room virtually as well, a multidisciplinary group, what one suggestion you might have for them to support this cross-sectoral, collaboration work to really embed health as a driver. And Marta, I'm going to turn it over to you first this time.
Oh boy, one thing we could do is, if this is what if I had a magic wand, this is what I would do. I would really push the health sector, particularly the hospitals, to look at their community benefits and invest more in the infrastructure of community nonprofits working on climate justice, because this is where the creativity and the ideas and the energy is coming from that we're going to need to sustain our victories and protect the wins, even the partial wins that we've won.
Oh, I love that so much. Amna from BSR.
Reducing it to one is so hard. There's so many things.
I
we all
asked the
need to be
hard-hitting
doing.
questions.
Yeah, you do, Seema. I would just say, I mean, I think, and I kind of mentioned this before in terms of healthcare's voice, but I just really think we need to continue putting pressure and speaking to this topic, right? We need to keep climate and health at the forefront of the climate and nature nexus. We need to keep talking about it, whether that's internally within your own organizations, whether that's within partnerships. We cannot lose we can't lose the impact to people and to people we know and to our communities in this moment at all. And I want to point to one just resource to help with that, the Centering Health Equity Within Climate Action collaboration. Oh, perfect. Thanks, Seema. We recently launched a toolkit to help with that. So co-authored by Martha and Seema and myself, three of us here, as well as a group of other amazing authors and climate and health leaders. But we've developed this toolkit specifically for business audiences to help them get started on this journey, to help them continue to talk about climate and health, and to, more importantly, make action internally to make sure that those actions on climate and health are also equitable. So I hate to leave a recommendation without a way to get there. So this is my way to get there. So for those of you who are on the call, would definitely recommend you take a look at the toolkit and share with others so that we can continue to keep climate health and health equity at the forefront.
Absolutely. And Amna, let me turn it to you.
Hard to follow up with those two. I will say, I guess one is definitely the cross collaboration within the organization with your value chain, supply chain. The example that popped up into my head was really, I remember going to the Boston Medical Group up in Boston, and they were giving us a tour of their rooftop garden. And it was actually their food supplier for the whole hospital, for their patients, for the families that are coming through, that created this food, the rooftop garden, where they were actually taking fruits and vegetables from that rooftop garden and bringing into their kitchen to supply and to provide that for their patients as well as their families. And I just thought that was such a cool way to collaborate. And then they were also bringing students from the local neighborhoods to sort of, see it, feel it, engage in that rooftop garden. I just thought that was such a powerful way to create that partnership. And it was a big hospital, big supplier, Sedesco, right, that did that. So then we started working with Sedesco on policy. We're like, oh, you're interested in this space. So it just sort of opened up, that partnership opened up, our sort of eyes to think about how do you start engaging your suppliers within your hospital system if you work for a hospital system. So sort of really thinking about, up and down your value chain, up and down your supply chain. And I think one other I'm going to say two things, sorry. One other thing, Amna, you had mentioned, bringing in doctors, clinicians, health clinicians. I think to talk to, doctors, healthcare providers, always will be credible in front of policymakers' eyes, right? So bringing sort of the frontline workers to, in my case, policy advocacy events is huge because everybody sort of drops, gets quiet, and starts listening when they talk. I've seen it in action on Capitol Hill. I've seen it in action in state houses as well. So I think utilizing your frontline workers, clinicians, is really, really important as well to sort of keep that idea that health and climate are very much linked. So thank you.
Thank you. This was such a joy to lead this panel. And thank you to all of our esteemed panelists, as well as those online and those in the room. And really hope you guys heed some of that advice to support some cross-sectoral collaboration of your own. Thank you so much.